Your life doesn't change because you found new information. It changes because you finally applied the old information you'd been ignoring for years. There's a saying that's followed self-improvement for decades. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Most people hear that and nod, then go right back to doing nothing about it. They wait for a better mood, a better year, a better version of themselves to show up before they start. And while they wait, months turn into years, and years turn into a life spent standing still. I used to be one of those people. I collected advice like it was a hobby. Books, seminars, podcasts, notebooks full of ideas I never used. I was informed and stuck at the same time. Then I came across the philosophy of Jim Rohn, a man who spent his whole life teaching one simple idea. It's not the big dramatic moves that build a life. It's the small disciplines, repeated daily, that turn into something unrecognizable over time. I didn't rebuild my life in a year. I didn't need a decade. I took 5 of Rohn's core principles and gave them 1 week, 7 days of real, uncomfortable, consistent effort. And that 1 week did more for my confidence, my direction, and my discipline than the previous 2 years combined. This isn't about becoming a different person overnight. It's about proving to yourself that you can follow through. Rohn used to say that success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines, practiced every day, while failure is simply a few errors in judgment, repeated every day. That's the whole game, not intensity, repetition. Think about how strange that actually is. We tend to imagine failure as some dramatic collapse, a single terrible decision that ruins everything. Rarely is that true. Failure usually looks like nothing at all in the moment. It looks like skipping the workout because you're tired, just this once. It looks like putting off the hard conversation for 1 more week. It looks like scrolling for 20 minutes instead of reading 10 pages. None of those choices feel significant on their own. That's exactly why they're dangerous. They don't announce themselves as the moment your life started drifting off course. They just quietly repeat, day after day, until 1 year you look up and realize you're standing in the exact same place you were 12 months ago, except more tired and more discouraged. Success works the same way, just in the opposite direction. It rarely announces itself either. It's not the day you land the promotion or hit the number on the scale. Those are just the visible proof of something invisible that had already been happening for months, sometimes years. Small disciplined choices compounding quietly in the background while nobody was watching, including you. So if you're tired of feeling like you're starting over every Monday, if you're ready to stop collecting advice and start living it, this is for you. Stay with me for the next few minutes as I walk you through the 5 habits that changed my life in a single week and show you exactly how to apply each one starting today. Let's get into it. Number 1, guard who you spend your time with. Let's start with the habit almost nobody wants to hear, because it means looking honestly at the people around you. Rohn built an entire philosophy around one blunt observation. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Not your goals, not your intentions, the people. Their habits become your habits. Their standards become your ceiling. Their excuses become your excuses, whether you notice it happening or not. Here's the part people get wrong. They think this is about cutting people off dramatically, storming out of friendships, becoming cold and superior. That's not it. It's quieter than that. It's about noticing who energizes you and who drains you, who challenges you to grow, and who quietly convinces you that staying the same is safer. Think about it honestly. If the people around you complain more than they build, settle more than they strive, and talk about dreams instead of acting on them, you will absorb that rhythm whether you want to or not. Not because you're weak, but because human beings are wired to match the emotional and behavioral temperature of the room they spend the most time in. It's not a character flaw, it's biology, which means it's also something you can use in your favor. Rohn didn't build his philosophy from a classroom. He built it after years working a low-paying job, broke and frustrated, until a mentor named Earl Shoaf pulled him aside and taught him to study people the way you'd study a map, not to judge them, but to learn what direction they were actually walking in. Rohn started paying attention to who he let influence his thinking. He sought out people who were further ahead, who held higher standards, who challenged his excuses instead of agreeing with them. That single shift in association became the foundation everything else was built on. This principle isn't reserved for entrepreneurs and public speakers. It applies to a parent trying to stay patient, a student trying to stay focused, anyone trying to build a better version of themselves. Spend enough time around people who normalize mediocrity, and mediocrity starts to feel normal. Spend time around people who take their goals seriously, and suddenly your own goals feel less embarrassing to admit out loud. Here's how you apply it this week. You don't need to unfriend anyone or make a public announcement. Just start noticing. After every conversation this week, ask yourself one question. Did I leave that interaction sharper, calmer, more motivated? Or did I leave drained, cynical, smaller than before? You don't have to act on every answer immediately. Just start collecting the data. Awareness always comes before change. Then, deliberately add one high-standard voice into your week. That could be a book by someone who's already where you want to be. It could be a podcast from someone whose discipline you respect. It could be reaching out to one person in your life who represents the direction you want to grow in, and asking them a single honest question about how they got there. You are not obligated to overhaul your entire social circle in 7 days. You are only obligated to start tilting the average, even slightly, in the direction of who you want to become. Because here's the truth most people avoid. You cannot consistently outperform the standards of the room you spend the most time in. Change the room, even a little, and everything else becomes easier. Number 2, choose discipline over motivation. Motivation is a liar. It shows up when things are exciting and disappears the moment things get repetitive, boring, or hard. And here's the trap. Most people wait for motivation before they act, which means their effort is completely dependent on their mood. That's an unstable foundation to build a life on. Rohn had a simple way of putting it. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Not talent, not luck, not motivation. Discipline, the willingness to do what needs to be done whether you feel like it or not. He used to point out that everyone has the same 24 hours in a day. The difference isn't the hours available, it's what people choose to do with them, especially on the days they don't feel inspired at all. This is the part that separates people who talk about change from people who actually change. It's easy to work out when you're motivated. It's easy to study when you're excited about the subject. The real test, the one that actually builds a different life, is showing up on the days you'd rather not. That's where identity gets built. Not in the burst of enthusiasm, but in the follow-through after the enthusiasm has completely worn off. Think about anyone you admire for their consistency, an athlete, a business owner, a parent who somehow manages to keep everything running. None of them are running purely on motivation. They build systems and standards that don't depend on how they feel that morning. They made discipline the default, so willpower doesn't have to fight the same battle every single day. Rohn's own turning point came from tracking his own effort honestly for the first time. Comparing what he intended to do against what he actually did, and being embarrassed by the gap. That embarrassment became fuel. He didn't wait to feel like a disciplined person before acting like one. He acted first and the identity caught up later. That order matters. Most people wait to feel ready before they commit. Discipline works backward. You commit first and readiness follows the commitment, not the other way around. Here's how you apply it this week. Pick one task you've been avoiding specifically because you don't feel motivated to do it. Something small, concrete, and slightly uncomfortable. Do it every single day for the next 7 days, regardless of your mood that day. Not when you feel inspired, every day. If it's exercise, do the workout on the days you feel like garbage, not just the days you feel strong. If it's a difficult conversation you keep postponing, take one concrete step toward it daily, even a small one. Track it. At the end of each day, write a single line. Did I do the disciplined thing today? Yes or no? No excuses column, no context, just a simple record. By day 4 or 5, something shifts. You stop negotiating with yourself every morning about whether today is a motivated day. You just do the thing because that's who you've decided to be. That shift from negotiating with yourself to simply acting is the entire difference between people who transform their lives and people who talk about transforming their lives for years without moving. Number 3. Work harder on yourself than on your job. This is the idea Rohn is most remembered for, and it's the one people misunderstand the fastest. It doesn't mean neglect your work. It means recognize that your income, your results, and your circumstances are a direct reflection of your personal development, not the other way around. Most people try to fix their external results without ever upgrading the internal person producing them. That's like repainting a car with a broken engine and wondering why it still won't drive properly. Rohn used to say you should work harder on yourself than you do on your job, because your job is a result of who you are. And if you don't change who you are, you'll just create the same results in a different job, a different relationship, a different city. The scenery changes. The pattern doesn't, unless the person changes first. This is uncomfortable, because it removes the easiest excuse people rely on, blaming the circumstance instead of examining themselves. It's simpler to say the market's bad, the boss is unfair, the opportunities aren't there, than to ask a harder question. Am I the kind of person who currently deserves the outcome I'm asking for? That question isn't meant to shame you. It's meant to hand you back control, because circumstances are largely outside your influence, but who you become is entirely within it. Ron's own transformation didn't start with a better job opportunity. It started with him deciding to spend part of every single day investing in his own thinking, reading material that challenged him, studying people who had already built what he wanted, and applying what he learned, instead of just consuming it. He treated personal growth like a non-negotiable appointment, not something reserved for spare time that never actually arrives. Here's how you apply it this week. Set aside 30 minutes a day, just 30, and use it exclusively for building yourself. Not your to-do list, not your inbox, you. That could mean reading something that challenges your thinking, listening to something that stretches your perspective, or simply reflecting honestly on where you're avoiding responsibility in your own life. The subject matters less than the consistency. 30 minutes a day for personal growth. Treat it as seriously as a client meeting you couldn't cancel. At the end of each day, ask yourself one question. What did I learn about myself today that I didn't know yesterday? Write the answer down, even if it's uncomfortable, especially if it's uncomfortable. Because the moment you start treating your own development as seriously as your responsibilities, everything downstream of that, your work, your relationships, your confidence, starts improving without you forcing it directly. You stop chasing better circumstances and start becoming the kind of person better circumstances are naturally drawn to. Consider two people starting the exact same job on the exact same day. Same salary, same title, same office. 5 years later, one of them is running a department and the other is still doing the same tasks they started with, frustrated that nobody ever gave them a chance. The difference almost never comes down to who got the lucky break. It comes down to what each of them did with the hours outside of work, whether they spent those hours developing new skills and sharper thinking, or spent them the same way every evening, waiting for an opportunity that was never going to knock on its own. Opportunity tends to find the person who already made themselves ready for it, not the person who's still waiting to start preparing once the opportunity arrives. Number 4, set goals and write them down where you'll see them. Here's a pattern almost everyone falls into. They have a vague sense of what they want: a better body, more money, a calmer life, but they never translate that vague feeling into something specific enough to actually act on. A wish is not a goal. A goal has a shape, it has a deadline, it has a next action. Without that shape, your ambition just floats around in your head, occasionally making you feel guilty, never actually moving you forward. Rohn taught that setting goals is what turns invisible ambition into visible progress. Not because writing something down has magic properties, but because the act of writing forces clarity you don't get from just thinking. When a goal only exists in your head, it's vague enough to avoid, easy to postpone, easy to reshape every time it gets inconvenient. When it exists on paper in specific language, it becomes something you either did or didn't do. There's nowhere to hide from that. He also emphasized something people skip past too quickly. Goals aren't just about the destination, they're about who you have to become to reach it. If your goal requires more discipline than you currently have, more skill than you currently possess, more courage than you currently show, the process of chasing that goal is what builds those qualities in you. That's the actual value of goal setting. Not just the outcome you're aiming at, but the person the pursuit forces you to become along the way. Rohn used to describe watching people set the same vague resolutions year after year. Lose weight, make more money, be happier, without ever specifying what any of that actually meant in practice. Vague goals produce vague effort. Specific goals produce specific action. If your goal is simply be healthier, there's no clear next step. If your goal is walk 20 minutes every morning before checking your phone, there's nothing left to figure out. You either do it or you don't. Here's how you apply it this week. Take 15 minutes and write down 3 goals, one for the next 30 days, one for the next 12 months, one for the next 5 years. For each one, write the single next physical action required to move it forward. Not the whole plan, just the next step. Put that piece of paper somewhere. You will physically see it every single day: your mirror, your desk, the inside cover of your notebook. Each morning this week, read it before you check anything else. Not for motivation, for direction. You're not trying to feel inspired by it. You're trying to make sure your daily actions actually connect to something bigger than just getting through the day. Most people are busy without being productive, because busy just means occupied, and productive means moving towards something specific. A written goal, seen daily, is what closes that gap. There's a reason so many people quietly abandon their goals within the first few weeks of setting them. It's not because the goal was wrong. It's because the goal only existed as a feeling, an intention they carried around in their head, easy to lose in the noise of a busy day. A goal you have to walk past every morning behaves completely differently. It stops being a hope and starts being an obligation, something you either honored today or didn't, staring back at you in your own handwriting. That kind of daily accountability, small and unglamorous as it is, does more for follow-through than any amount of motivation ever could. Number 5, take full responsibility and stop blaming your circumstances. This is the habit that quietly determines whether everything else on this list actually works. You can guard your associations, build discipline, invest in yourself, and write down your goals, but if you're still mentally handing responsibility for your result, your boss, your upbringing, the economy, or bad luck, none of it sticks. Responsibility isn't about blame, it's about ownership. And ownership is the only thing that gives you the power to change your situation. Rohn was direct about this. He said that we didn't get to choose the family we were born into, or the country, or the era. But from that point forward, everything is affected by the choices we make. Blaming your starting point might feel emotionally justified, and sometimes it genuinely is unfair, but it doesn't change your position an inch. The only thing that changes your position is deciding, starting now, that you're responsible for what happens next, regardless of what happened before. This is uncomfortable because blame feels protective. If it's not your fault, you don't have to do the hard work of changing it. But that protection comes at a brutal cost. It also means you don't have the power to fix it either, because you've handed that power away to circumstances outside yourself. The moment you take responsibility, even for things that genuinely weren't fair, you get that power back. It's a trade almost everyone should be willing to make. Rohn's own history reflects this directly. He didn't come from privilege or connections. He came from a working-class background and a job that was going nowhere. And the turning point wasn't a change in circumstances. It was a change in how he related to those circumstances. He stopped waiting for permission or better luck and started asking a different question. Given exactly where I am right now, what is the next responsible action available to me? That question, repeated daily, is what rebuilt his entire trajectory. Here's how you apply it this week. Every time you catch yourself blaming something outside your control this week, a person, a situation, bad timing, pause and ask one question. What is the one thing inside my control in this exact situation? Then do that one thing, no matter how small it feels. This isn't about pretending unfair things don't happen. They do. It's about refusing to let unfair circumstances become your excuse for staying stuck. At the end of each day, write down one moment where you took responsibility instead of blaming something external. Even something as small as admitting you were late because you didn't plan your morning well instead of blaming traffic. That small honesty repeated daily retrains your brain to look for what you can control instead of what you can't. And that's the exact mindset shift that makes the previous 4 habits actually hold. It helps to remember that responsibility and blame are not the same thing, even though they get confused constantly. Blame asks, who caused this? Responsibility asks, what am I going to do about it? You can hold both truths at once, that something wasn't your fault and that you're still the one who has to act on it, because nobody else is coming to fix it for you. That's not a punishment. It's actually the most freeing realization available to you. Because it means your future was never really in the hands of whoever or whatever wronged you in the first place. It's in yours, and it always was. So here we are, 5 habits drawn from decades of tested philosophy, compressed into 7 days of real action. Guard who you spend your time with, because you become the average of the people around you. Choose discipline over motivation, because feelings are unreliable, and consistency isn't. Work harder on yourself than on your job, because your results are downstream of who you are, not the other way around. Set goals and write them down, because vague ambition produces vague effort, and specific goals produce specific action. And finally, take full responsibility for what happens next, because ownership is the only thing that hands you back the power to change your situation. None of this requires perfection. Rohn never taught perfection. He taught consistency, the willingness to do simple things daily, even when they feel small, even when nobody's watching, even when progress feels invisible. That's the whole secret hiding in plain sight. Not one dramatic transformation, but 5 ordinary disciplines, repeated for 7 days, until they stop feeling like effort and start feeling like who you are. So, here's the question worth sitting with. What would your life look like exactly 1 week from today if you actually did this? All 5, starting now. No waiting for the right mood or the right moment. You already know the answer, because you've probably felt that answer sitting quietly in the back of your mind for a while now. The only thing left is deciding to act on it before another year passes you by. Give yourself this week. Guard your circle. Choose discipline. Invest in yourself daily. Write down where you're going. Take responsibility for getting there. Do that, and by the end of these 7 days, you won't just feel different, you'll be different. And more importantly, you'll have proof that you're capable of becoming whoever you decide to become next. And that proof matters more than people realize. Most people don't lack the ability to change. They lack the evidence that they're someone who follows through. So every time they try, A quiet voice reminds them of every other attempt that fizzled out. 7 days of real, tracked, undeniable action is how you finally argue back against that voice with something better than good intentions. Actual results you can point to. Not a promise this time. Proof. Rohn spent decades teaching rooms full of people the same underlying message in different forms, that the path to a better life was never hidden or complicated. It was simply unpopular, because it asked people to do ordinary things with extraordinary consistency, and most people would rather search for a shortcut than accept that the plain, unglamorous path was the real one all along. You now have 5 of those ordinary disciplines laid out in front of you. The only variable left is whether you close this out and forget it by tomorrow afternoon, or whether you actually give it the 7 days it deserves. That decision, small as it seems right now, is exactly the kind of decision this whole philosophy was built around.